Stephanie, can you hear me?
No.
We were.
I can. Yes, Adam.
Okay, excellent. Good.
Good morning.
Let's see. I am well this morning. I'm just gonna try and do a little bit of a head count before we start, so we know we're ready.
Okay. We do have Diane Lamfer and Katie Gallagher on the phone. So 2 members
Okay.
attending virtually.
Great. Good. Right. 6. So I don't believe we have a quorum yet. There's there's Ron. So I'm just gonna take another couple of minutes and let people come in until we do have quorum. We're looking for 9, yes.
And we're at 7 right now, the bigger version.
Can you let me know who is in the room? Because I do know I can confirm whether others I know Matt was going to be there. Is he in the room?
Present.
Okay. Let me Bill Smith he could not attend.
So let's see, Ron Redmond is in the room.
Yep.
Mary Rudd is in the room.
Okay.
Rennie Perry is in the room. I am in the room.
Katie on the line.
I think Brent said he was going to be there.
Brett Rakowski.
Yeah, I thought he did.
Oh, or can you see it up there?
It
Yeah,
looks like Brett's note taker's up, but I don't know if he's
okay.
joined us.
Okay.
Okay, we'll put a star there, and I'm hoping Phil Summers will be here. How about some of the folks from V-Trans? Is either Matthews here?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
one of them.
One of the Matthews.
And the other Matthew said he would be participating virtually. I can ping him right now.
If we get Brett, or if we get the other Matthew, or maybe Phil Summers or Rhonda Williams, we're gonna be here too, I think. So we're one away.
One away.
And I will start this meeting. So entertain yourselves for a moment. Tell a joke.
There's snacks, there's drinks and food just behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz curtain over there. Folks eat some
sandwiches
or sandwiches. So
Good. So it is a lunch meeting, but help yourself anytime, because we're not necessarily gonna break. We'll see how things go.
yep.
It does look like Phil is joining us now virtually.
Okay, great. Okay, so Phil, welcome. You basically make quorum for us, so thank you for being here. I appreciate it. It is 11:04. My name is Adam Luigi. I'm director of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. I am also chair of your policy committee. So I want to thank you all for coming. This is a big meeting for us. We've done a lot of work for a long time, and I'm happy to be to this point. So welcome. I guess I want to put the agenda in front of you. Whoops.
And
Sorry, that's me.
it's okay. Got it.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everybody can see that agenda. Stephanie, can you see it for those online?
Yes,
We can see it.
Thumbs up from Katie too.
Okay,
so,
great,
yeah.
good.
Thank you, Katie.
Does anybody have any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay. And Brett Rakowski just walked into the room. Welcome, Brett. Thank you for being here. Okay, without any.
Adam, just one thing I wanted to mention for the record. The agenda that was posted online had the public comment period at the end of the meeting, and we did move it up. That's why it's shown in italics there, but that is not necessarily, I guess it's a change, a reorder of the agenda, but not a new agenda item.
Well, then why don't I ask everybody if they will approve the agenda as presented? So may I have a motion for that, Rennie? So Rennie moves to approve the agenda as presented. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Any discussion about the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Thank you. All right, great. Delia, do you want to talk about Zoom for us?
Yes, please. Thank you. I know many are in person today, so that's wonderful. But for the few who are joining us virtually, just a quick Zoom orientation. We've done this before, but a friendly reminder, you are welcome to mute and unmute yourself. If you have a question or a comment, you can use that mute icon. We do ask if you're joining us online to stay muted during any portion of the presentation to eliminate background noise. You are also welcome to turn your video on and off if when you're making a comment or asking a question you'd like to turn that video on, you can. You can also use the chat feature to enter questions or comments into the chat box if you prefer to use that instead of speaking aloud. You can also use the reaction in order to raise your hand if you have a question at any time. We will see that and then we can call on you. And then lastly, we have the screen view. So if you'd like to change the different way you're viewing today's presentation as well as the other cameras, since we do have the panoramic camera for those in the room, you can do that under screen view. And with that, we can move over to the roll call. We did a bit of an informal one, but if everyone's all right with it, I'll just do a formal one.
Please do, Delia.
Okay. So we'll start with our voting members. If when I call your name, if you could just respond with here. Adam, just kick us off. Thank you. Bill Smith. I believe I heard he wasn't coming. Okay. Katie Gallagher.
Here.
Welcome, Katie. Brent Rakowski.
Here.
Hi, Brent. Clark Hinsdale. Representative Lanfer. Nope. I do see she's here, but it looks like she might be having some issues connecting to audio. All right. Jubilee McGill. Ron Redmond.
Here.
Welcome. Matt Bozick. Oh, I see Matt is on, but maybe not connected to audio just yet. He just joined us.
Oh, was that me? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Were you
Okay.
just sorry for my poor mispronunciation of your last name.
No, it's no problem. Yep, Matt, I'm here.
Welcome, Matt. Matthew Arancio.
I am here.
Hi, Matt. I'm Mary Rudd.
Here.
Welcome. Representative Barong.
Here.
Hello. Mike Audie. Rennie Perry.
Here.
Welcome. Phil Summers.
Here.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. And Rhonda Williams.
Here.
Welcome. All right. And if we can go on to our next slide, we do want to announce any of our non-voting members and other representatives joining us today. So for some of our non-voting members, Amy Bell, Faith Dahl, Joel Perigo, Mike Winslow.
I'm here.
Welcome, Mike. Liz Shipley.
I am here.
Good morning. And Jacqueline LeBlanc. And then from our consulting team, representatives from WSP, if I miss you, please speak up. Stephanie Kamei.
Good morning.
Steve Charamonti.
Good morning.
Morning. Annabelle Daly.
Morning.
Hi, Annabelle. Maya Miller.
Good morning.
Morning. With Du Bois and King, I have Ken Roby.
In person? Hi.
Ken, is there anyone else joining you from Du Bois and King?
No, nope,
Oh.
just me.
And then VHB, Jim Gish.
Yep, right here.
Good morning, Jim. Just you,
Morning.
correct? No one else from VHB?
Just me.
Okay, wonderful. And then do we have any other attendees joining us today who are not part of today's roll call? Either in the room or
Yes.
online? Please.
We have one person in the room
One online.
and one online as well.
Wonderful. The person in the room, would you please introduce yourself for the record?
Sure. My name is Mel Hawley, and let me spell you my last name. It's Hawley. So I noticed in some other minutes, they spelled it as if I was the tree.
That was probably me. Apologies for that.
No problem.
Thank you. And then it looks like Terry Pelletier joining us from Panton. He posted that in the chat, so welcome, Terry. And I think we can move forward. Am I passing it back to you, Adam, or over to Stephanie?
Over to Stephanie, please.
Thank you. On to you, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, Delia, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us both virtually and in person. So I am going to just start with a brief study overview, and I know you've heard this many times, so I'll try and keep it brief. And then also I'm going to move on to the alternatives evaluation and then our consultant team's recommendation. So you did receive the alternatives evaluation tech memo, and hopefully you've had a chance to review it. And we're going to be going over the results of that and looking at the evaluation matrix and the routes that the consultant team has recommended for further study. So the Route 22A corridor has been studied for over 25 years, and our goal with the PEL is to take those previous planning studies and link the planning efforts with future environmental review. The previous studies indicated regional agreement that truck volumes in downtown Vergennes should be addressed. Through the PEL study, we're making a concentrated effort on outreach and engagement as we develop transportation solutions. The next slide, Maya. The PEL study is an approximately 3-year process, and as Matthew and Adam mentioned in the beginning, we're really at the end of that process, which is really exciting. So the last time we met with you, we reviewed the criteria that we were planning to use to evaluate the route alternatives. And since that meeting, we've incorporated your input and have then conducted the evaluation of each of the route alternatives. So we're really wrapping up that yellow highlighted box. And then the next steps will be to develop an implementation plan and then wrap all of the pieces together into a final PEL report. And that the goal is to, excuse me, to really wrap that up within the next few months. So in the first quarter of 2025. So next slide, Maya. PEL is, it's really important to remember that PEL is a planning process. So within the defined phases of the VTrans project life cycle, PEL fits into project initiation. So you can see on the left of the slide, the PEL study will be complete, as I mentioned, in 2025. And then after funding authorization, any future alternatives will move forward through conceptual design, environmental review, preliminary and final design, right-of-way, and finally construction. So again, it's a planning study and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. But the idea is that the PEL will really help streamline the environmental process. And then, as I noted earlier, that public outreach is a really big component of the PEL, the PEL process. So next slide, ma'am. On the call today, we have members of the policy committee, and we're going to be asking for your approval of the alternatives evaluation tech memo that we shared with you at the end of last year. And hopefully, again, you've reviewed it. And in the tech memo, the consultant team has identified recommended route alternatives. So we're going to be looking for your approval of the tech memo, the recommended route alternatives, as well as your consensus to move forward with NEPA pending funding authorization from VTrans. So as we think about this decision-making process, we are asking for an approval, we are asking for your vote, but we still are in that planning process. So we have to remember that, and that the goal of PEL is to reduce the number of alternatives and identify potential impacts that we can, that will be looked at further in NEPA and can streamline that process. But these really are recommendations, and nothing is really binding until the NEPA process. Okay, so I'll pause here. Any questions so far? It's hard when I can't see people's faces, so please jump in if you have any questions or would like me to say anything more. Next slide,
We
Mike.
see lots of nodding and consent to move
Okay.
forward.
Okay. Okay, so I'll quickly recap then the concept screening. So next slide, Maya. So 4 new roadways are being studied, along with an option that uses existing roadways, so the purple route, and then a no build that assumes no changes beyond normal routine maintenance. The 5 build options are shown on the figure to the right, and all of these routes, as we've met several times through 2024 and through our documentation or conceptual design process, we know that all of the routes have strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. And these were further evaluated through a set of criteria that was based on the purpose and need. So next slide, Maya. The purpose defines the transportation problem to be solved, and the need provides evidence that supports the purpose. So this purpose and need statement that is shown on the slide here, it was developed through the PEL study. We didn't start from scratch. We started with the purpose and need that was developed through the previous study, so the 2019 study. And then it also reflects extensive public outreach and data collection efforts. So this purpose and need, again, that's shown on the slide, this was approved, it was developed through public outreach, and then it was approved by the technical and policy committees. Next slide. So the tech memo that we shared with you was reviewed by VTrans and ACRPC. What's shown on the slide here is some of the comments that we received. We did have a meeting with VTrans leadership where we briefed the VTrans leadership on the results and the recommendation early December. And then we also met with the technical committee on December 13th. So some of the feedback that we have gotten from the Historic Preservation Office within VTrans, they were asking for a little bit more, a deeper dive on historic and cultural resources. That has been conducted. It is not represented in the alternatives evaluation tech memo that you received. The additional input is being reviewed by the Historical Preservation Office, and then it will be incorporated into the final version. I'll note this with the cost as well, but it's important that I want to make note that the changes that were made to the tech memo did not change the study team's recommendation. So then when we met with the leadership, VTrans leadership in early December, the feedback that we received is that the construction cost seemed a little on the low side. And we had a review with VTrans design group and engineering, and they provided some additional data. We used the best we could really based on conceptual designs, but we received additional information from VTrans, which increased the construction cost. And Katie, I see you have your hand raised, so I'll just finish this piece and then I'll let you chime in. We also got feedback that we should include the development costs and development costs would be really the soft cost. So preliminary, the engineering, right-of-way costs, we've incorporated things like wetland mitigation, right-of-way costs, I think I mentioned, agricultural soils. So we just tried to include a little bit more to show the true picture of what the full cost would be. So again, the historic and cultural resources assessment did not change the results, and the cost, which I'll explain a little bit later, but they did not, our evaluation was based solely on the criteria. So the cost did not play into the evaluation. And Katie, you had a question?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious, given that all of the potential alternative routes had what seems like fairly significant environmental impacts, whether I'm not sure if it would have been appropriate to engage with A&R or if VTrans or any of the Regional Planning Commission feedback included some of the potential environmental impacts in this review.
Stephanie, I can help answer that one to kick things off. Katie, thank you for asking that question. So the agency, so VTrans, just for everybody in the room here, Matthew Rencio from VTrans, helping to steward the study to its completion. We do coordinate with A&R and ACCD as part of the review of this document. So we're happy to receive any additional feedback directly from the agencies, as the case may be, but have done that initial contact to them to discuss further. And then as far as the environmental impact goes, that section is then also reviewed by our historic and cultural resources officers within the agency itself, as well as our environmental folks. So there's the actual production of the chapter itself, along with the internal VTrans review, flagging of content for either other agency partners, for the Regional Planning Commission. But yeah, there's a substantial, I think what I'm trying to say here is there's a substantial vetting process that has a lot of cross-agency and cross-organization information sharing to do so.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, Maya. Okay, so what's shown here on the slide, and everybody has a copy of the evaluation matrix, a hard copy in front of them.
So I brought hard copy, if anybody would like one, I brought hard copy.
Okay.
I have one copy of the full tech memo as well, which I didn't want to make 25 copies of, it's a little bigger, but. Excellent, good. But if anybody wants to refer to anything, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Ken. And I have it, I will pull it up on the screen as well. So this would be the evaluation matrix that is within the alternatives evaluation tech memo. So it on the evaluation matrix, you'll see that there are numerous criteria that we use to evaluate the route alternatives. But this slide really is high level, and what we've done here is grouped the evaluation criteria into 3 categories. And these are really very much in line with the purpose and need. So the first row is the transportation impact. So this is a transportation project, and any transportation project essentially needs to provide a transportation benefit. So what we did is we took all of the transportation criteria, and I'm going to go through this high level summary first, and then if you have the evaluation matrix in front of you, you can see all the criteria, but I'll pull it up in a second so you can see it as well. So we will go into more detail. This is the high level summary though. So what we did is we looked at the transportation impacts, and based on the evaluation, all of the routes except for the purple route provide a transportation benefit. So they would meet the purpose and need from a transportation perspective. So that would be that, and we can pull up again the purpose and need, but it would be all the mobility, the safety, and any transportation type improvement. So then the next category is the local and regional issues. So yeah,
Can I interrupt you there for a second?
please.
In terms of the purple alternative, I'm just curious in terms like what are the key aspects of the transportation component that don't meet the purpose and need? And you know, just I guess in my perspective, in reading purpose and need, it's, you know, the primary objective here is to get truck traffic out of downtown Vergennes, and that in and of itself, I think, meets that purpose and need. Is there, you know, the criteria that's gone through in terms of traffic impacts, the impacts I see from the purple route lessen all the other components and still meet the purpose and need. Is that not the case? Or
So we're going to jump into that in
Okay,
just a
great.
minute.
Thank you.
So
Sorry.
we'll do a quick overview and then we'll go category by category.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Do you want me to pull it up now, or Ken, go back to the summary?
While we finish the overview and then we can go.
Okay.
Criteria.
Okay, Maya, you can go back to sharing. Did I take? There, I'll stop sharing. Sorry about that. Okay, so I will answer that question. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment here. So focusing on then the local and regional issues. So here's where we had a big component of the purpose and need really is the impacts of truck traffic. So the noise impacts, the air quality impacts, and also so looking really at the quality of life. And we really tried to keep it at both a local and a regional scale. So that was something that was really important that came out in our early outreach efforts related to the purpose and need, that we really want to make sure that we're thinking of, yes, the impacts are in downtown Vergennes, but we don't want to necessarily displace the impacts into another area. So again, we focused on that, looking at criteria that provides a local benefit as well as a regional benefit. And we'll go through all of that criteria here in a moment, but based on that evaluation, only the blue route and the pink route alternatives provided a benefit of local and regional issues. So the green route, the orange route, and then the purple route do not provide that benefit. So in summary, really, those only the blue route and the pink route fully meet the purpose and need using the evaluation criteria that we have set forth, and really taking that deeper dive into the alternatives evaluation. We did do an initial screening probably about, I guess, a year and a half ago. But this is, again, based on we have more information now. We took a deeper dive into all of the many resources, and we also used our conceptual designs to help us to identify those transportation impacts, those local regional issues. Then the third category is the environmental resources. And Katie, you mentioned that there are numerous environmental impacts, and we know that. That is the purpose of this study, is really to identify those potential environmental impacts. This is really just a cursory look at using the data that we have, but during the NEPA process, certainly many some of these environmental resources could be mitigated through avoidance or other mitigation efforts. So when you look across all 5 alternatives, really they have varying degrees. You do see a little bit higher impacts with the purple route, the blue route, and the pink route, but for the most part, they are across the board have impacts. The orange route a little bit less, but that makes sense because it is a shorter route, so it would hit less environmental resources. And then the yellow box is really just focusing on those first 3 rows, as that is what we use for our alternatives evaluation process. But the costs are shown on the bottom. Construction costs, you had those costs in the tech memo that you received. The development cost estimate, these have been prepared based on input that we received from VTrans leadership, and that is an added item on that last row. So, and we're going to take a more detailed look into each of these criteria here in a moment, but any questions on just the higher level summary before we move on?
No questions so far in the room here, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you.
That's previous question about the purple route.
Yep.
Yes, okay. So I think we can go to the next slide, Maya. Yeah. Now I will open up the evaluation matrix again. Thought I had one more there before, so okay. Okay, can everyone see my screen here?
We can see it.
Okay, so let me just go to page width here. So one question that came up with the technical committee that I just want to make sure to clarify, and hopefully this was clear as you reviewed the memo and when you look at the matrix in front of you. So the color coding is based on the impact or benefit. So if you look at the criteria, some of them are assessing an impact, while some are looking at the benefit. So there's positives or negatives. The deeper the red color, the greatest impact, and then the deeper the green color, the greatest benefit. So we use that plus minus system, which hopefully was clear as you reviewed the evaluation matrix. So going back to the question about the purple, Steve, I'll start, but then if there's additional questions, I might have you chime in here. So the purple, so we looked at with transportation, we looked at the primary purpose is reducing the number of trucks on Route 22A. And the purple route, yes, it does do that, but not to the level that the blue and the pink and the green routes do. So it's really only half the amount of traffic rather than the full amount. So that's why you see a slightly lower scale there.
And just as a reminder, the reason for that being is that this is a north-south split. Okay, so just as a reminder to folks, it'd be a different score if all truck traffic was in both directions was going to Route 17.
Thanks, Ken. And then the travel time, that's where you really see the change in travel length. So it is a significantly longer route that we would be diverting trucks for an additional, at least half of the trucks, either northbound or southbound. So you see that plus 5 miles there right here. So that's where you're really seeing the purple route is not performing as well from a transportation perspective. And then the travel times would also be significantly longer. So where you're seeing from the blue and the pink route, as well as the orange, travel times actually are better. And that's why you're seeing that plus, where the travel times for truck traffic would be increased for the purple route. So really that's why you're seeing the purple route not performing as well from a transportation perspective.
So Stephanie, is that, I guess I'm trying to understand how that fits with the purpose and need. I mean, you know, not to seem coarse here, but you know, for truck drivers, they have to drive an extra 5 miles. Like, honestly, I don't care. Right. I mean, being a resident in the city of Vergennes, that to me is not a decision point or something that should be weighted lesser, in my opinion, than the number of the reduction in the number of vehicles. Right. I mean, whether Joe truck driver has to drive another 5 miles, that in my mind doesn't necessarily align with the purpose and need or a category that should really even to a certain extent be evaluated. I don't know. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I'm just trying to understand how that matches with the regional. I guess, you know, we're mitigating by, if the purple route is an option, there are impacts obviously to the folks along 17, but they're somewhat mitigated in the sense that we're dividing that up between the region, if that makes sense.
Well, something that we've discussed, you know, quite a bit as we were developing the evaluation, and I believe it was also something that we discussed at our last policy committee, is the weighting of the criteria. And we did consider, you know, does it make sense to weight certain criteria more? And I think the end result and the decision really was that at this point, it makes sense to think of all the criteria as an equal weight. I think it's particularly when you get to environmental resources, you know, weighting one over the other can be a little bit tricky because certain agencies might not agree with that weighting. So, I mean, it's certainly something that the committee can and open for discussion and the committee can talk about. But at this time, we weighted all of the criteria equally. So the traffic volume is an equal weight with travel length and mileage.
Just before folks speak, if they could just say who they are, just so that the folks online can know whom is asking the question, that would be great too. Just that.
This is Mary. And Stephanie, I can Go ahead.
I'm looking at your plus ratings on the change in travel times for freight vehicles for the blue and the pink routes. I noticed in the technical memo, you're talking stop signs at Panton Road and McDonough Drive. Now, haven't we learned our lessons from Route 7 with having to install traffic lights at 22A intersection and the Moncton Road intersection? With a proposed speed limit of 45 miles an hour, that's going to create a big change to Panton Road and McDonough Drive intersections. And I don't think stop signs, I mean, how many people do you want to have accidents before you put in a traffic light? And if you put in traffic lights, would those evaluation scores change?
Steve, since you were gonna, yeah, Steve, since you were gonna talk anyway, I think that's a good place for you to jump in.
Yeah, and I want to just get on the purpose and need topic just real quick, and then I'll talk a little bit about the blue and the pink. So for the mobility and access category within the purpose and need, we did lay out, I think, pretty clearly that maintaining throughput of freight is part of the overall purpose and need of the project. So I think we're certainly trying to balance many different users on within each of these alternatives. So I wanted to make sure that point was clear. For the blue and the pink, at this stage, we're really looking at I think the sort of the lowest level of treatment at the project intersections given expected traffic volumes. I think as these would move forward into NEPA, that's where you would take a much deeper dive into the sort of the level of intersection treatment, be it a roundabout or a signal at each of the intersections that would be created through any of the alternatives that would move forward. But again, at this level, doing the traffic analysis that we did, the two-way stop control is operationally sufficient, but understanding that there may be additional safety or other treatments necessary at those intersections.
But you're using that assumption to score these options. So that's not really a fair comparison.
So in this case, it gives you the worst case for that alternative. So the stop and go would give you your longest travel time. So putting a signal there would actually improve the score for the pink and the
So you're
blue.
assuming four-way stop there? That was
Pardon?
not clear. That would be a four-way stop?
Actually, I think the crossroads have, if I remember right, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the crossroads have the right of way currently, and the new road stop has a stop condition.
I know at Moncton Road, I believe, or not Moncton, I'm sorry, Panton Road, Panton has priority. I have to look at the other, I forget what the other intersection, I think you mentioned.
Drive.
What was the other intersection you mentioned? I'm sorry.
McDonough Drive.
At McDonough, I'm trying to find it in the summary in the document. Bear with me. So at McDonough, the alternative route would have priority. However, at why can't I get this to zoom? At Panton Road and McDonough Drive. At Panton Road would have priority. At McDonough Drive, the alternative route would have priority. And again, that's based on existing throughput at each of those intersections.
So it's based on the volumes, whichever the predicted volumes of the new route versus the crossroad, whichever had the higher, that's what we assumed would have preference or priority for this level of analysis. He said, once you get into NEPA, you're gonna have to do a much higher level of modeling with that, a better idea of the actual volumes that would go through, and potentially signals would be warranted, but currently they don't meet the warrants.
I don't see any more questions in the room, Stephanie.
Okay, great. Then I will move on to the next grouping, and this goes over 2 pages. Well,
So
I guess-
Stephanie, you're
yep.
moving the local and regional issues,
Yep.
the second part of the purpose and need.
Yes.
The transportation issues, and when you basically added up all of the transportation issues, that's how you arrived at either the positive or negative scores.
That is correct, yes. Yes, so I guess before I move on to local, does the committee, well, we'll do a vote at the end. If there's questions, just please let me know. So the local and regional issues, so here's where we looked at quality of life. Again, we know that today, part of the reason for the purpose of the study to remove truck traffic through downtown Vergennes is to look at to mitigate or to reduce the impacts, the noise impacts and air quality impacts. So we looked at the noise, the decibel noise change at receptors along Route 22A in downtown Vergennes. And then we also looked at the number of new sensitive receptors. So a sensitive receptor would be anything from residential, institutional, so schools, churches, parks, and that's all described in the tech memo. So we looked at a distance of 500 feet within adjacent to any of the proposed route alternatives. So you'll see the numbers there. We also looked at property impacts. So we assessed whether partial or full acquisitions would be needed. And then you'll see, so there's an acreage, also the number of estimated full parcel acquisitions and the number of estimated parcel acquisitions.
Yep.
We then looked,
Yes,
is there a question?
going back to noise and air quality for a minute. So
Yep.
that this is another good example of the kind of the primary piece in the purpose is to pull trucks out of Vergennes, but it's to do so without having a negative impact in other places. So this kind of shows that the flip-flop or the opposite reactions, like the darker the green is a bigger positive on 22A, but it creates that putting that additional truck traffic someplace else creates impact.
And you said minimize it or you said, I guess the intent, I believe the intent is to minimize impacts, not
eliminate. Correct.
Eliminate. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Ken.
It kind of goes along with it. So the purple on the far left, because it's only half the traffic, has less of a benefit. And the orange on the far right, because vehicles are still going into downtown Vergennes, they're just not going all the way through downtown Vergennes. Stay neutral.
With respect to the property impacts, I believe a lot of that, at least along the purple route, would be reflective on the roadway section, what's chosen
on 17.
Yeah, on 17, and is. I guess it would be helpful for me to know, like, what level of traffic can 17 currently support, and then what the anticipated section would be. And, in my naive mind, is widening of 17 is very little impacts. You already have a 60-foot right of way there. You're expanding a shoulder 10 feet. There would be, in my mind, very limited need for parcel acquisition. I'm sure you got to go into a lot of detail in terms of what the drainage courses are and stuff like that, but
right.
It just seems like, at first blush, it seems like a very high number to me, given what I know of 17 and the existing corridor.
Right. So about approximately half of along Route 17, what we used for a basis was that 17 would have to be built to the same typical section as the new alternative piece. And it's also would match what is being proposed for 22A south of 17 at this point.
Yeah.
I forget exactly the numbers, but 11-foot lane, 6-foot shoulders, I think what is the goal there.
Okay.
So that alone is a widening the whole corridor. And then there's various areas that currently don't meet standards. And by putting the number of trucks on there that we would have to bring them up to standards. So approximately half of the entire length of 17 would be a full depth reconstruction, flattening curves, flattening elevations. So it is it's not your typical like pavement reclaim project.
Right,
So there are
right.
significant right of way impact, but they are all strip takings. So along, that's why you see 71 parcels, but only 28 acres.
Yep, and zero, there'd be no full
No actual
acquisition,
takings.
so, yeah, it's just silver takings, as Ken noted. Okay, so I'll move on to economic vitality then. So here's, and we did have a full economic assessment that is an appendix of the alternatives evaluation tech memo. So that's what we use for the basis of these criteria here. So we looked at property tax revenue, sales tax, and tourism revenue, and the potential for job creation and commercial occupancy rate. So these are not quantitative, they're qualitative. When you look at some of the numbers above here, when we have an actual number, the number is there. When you have that, I should have mentioned this earlier, when you have a plus or a minus, that it's because the criteria is a little bit more qualitative. So these are qualitative, and you can see here they're all plus. They all have a benefit. It's just the varying degrees of benefit.
And I'll just jump in for a second,
Please.
just to follow up. Katie, this kind of gets to your question from before. One of the previous chapters in this study was a future land use evaluation. So there was a large visioning process to understand what potential future land uses, future land uses could exist around the future roadway alternatives. We received ample feedback from ACCD about their concern about sprawl, right? So what would that mean for creating new space around an adjacent roadway? And so that chapter, to a certain degree, well, not to a certain degree, that chapter focuses on that future land use visioning perspective, while also acknowledging ACCD's concern about mitigating what would be some sort of sprawl impact, which would not be the case in any of these alternatives. So just to say, an example of working between the agencies to arrive at a conclusion here, specific to this chapter or this portion of the evaluation matrix.
Thank you, Matthew. And these tie into the next two criteria as well. That land use, really the land use visioning work really helped support these qualitative metrics here, where we're looking at the potential for infill development within Vergennes, and then also looking at routes that would require changes to zoning, comprehensive plans, or land classification.
Yeah, a couple of questions in the room.
Please.
How can the purple route have a more negative impact on zoning changes than the pink and the blue routes? I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, go ahead.
I will help you, Stephanie.
Yeah, go ahead.
The existing uses along the pink and the blue routes require less changes. So for example, if you're on Canton Road within the city of Vergennes, there already are industrial areas there. So there's Collins Aerospace, there's the industrial park across the street. Right, I know you are. It wouldn't have to change. If you go across the river, you get into basically the area that's now Job Corps that's owned by the state of Vermont.
The routes will go through Penn. Penn is zone residential agricultural.
Well,
you're not in the commercial.
One of them goes through Penn, at least currently, and I know we're doing a study on boundaries. One of them goes through Vergennes. Right?
So the pink and the blue then should be different.
They're both similar. Optimally, qualitative. So
I just think there's a distinction there that when you're impacting Canton zoning, or whether you're not impacting Canton zoning, and you will impact Canton zoning with at least the blue route.
I think we should note that. I think that's fair.
Okay.
But that's what you have there, and then going into the Job Corps area. The city of Vergennes has been looking to redevelop that, and then once you get into the north end of the corridor, There is, where it comes in by the police station, there is already some interest in developing housing in that area. So.
But you're talking all the funds impact and not your minimums and impact is my point.
So you are right with the southern, and I'll call it the southern end of the blue route does impact Panton on the Panton side, and it would or potentially require changes in the design. Absolutely.
Which is why it's shown as a minus. So it's, but other parts of the corridors are positive. So this is an entire corridor.
When you've got the purple road scored as double negative, everything is double negative except the blue route and the pink route.
Blue and pink.
My suggestion is that the blue route is also a double negative when you consider the Panton impacts. Leave the pink route or leave the pink route at one negative, you know, that's only Vergennes impact.
Right. I mean, just so you know, taking the town boundaries away, if it's ag land that is looked to potentially be developed, that's what gives it the negative. So it's not looked at if it's Panton town of land or Waltham land or.
It's zoned by town.
But if it's zoned ag, it's zoned ag, and that's what the criteria is based on. Throughout, so it's the same, it's an equal counting across all alternatives. Ignoring town lines, but just looking at zoning.
So, Brent Rakowski again. So that explains the purple and blue route, or the blue routes. And in terms of the purple route, what is that? There's.
Sure. I guess I'd tell you most of the purple route, Route 17. That's the new portion of the purple route, certainly. And goes through primarily rural, residential, agricultural, maybe some conservation in New Haven, Addison.
But it's an existing condition. There wouldn't need to be any changes to land use planning.
Well, if you're improving the highway, you're developing the potential for basically
Other
additional
uses.
land uses, and that's the reflection there is what I would suggest.
So why isn't that the same for the blue route? It's because it's short and it's Panton?
I wouldn't say, no, I don't think that's, the blue route's a more of a mixed bag.
Right.
But it's a fair question.
There wouldn't necessarily need to. I understand it from a planning perspective, at least for the city of Vergennes. But would there necessarily need to be any changes for any of this to accommodate?
No, is the answer. The towns could just not make changes.
Town's prerogative, whether or not they want to modify their.
So I think the point is, I think everybody agrees they're negatives. Regardless, it's where you draw the line between a single negative and a double negative. Is that more of a question? And is that an acreage question? Is that a length of road question? So we can look into how we drew that line. But this is more qualitative than it is quantitative. So it was more order of magnitude of how far did the land use visioning stray from the current uses. Anything else on that?
Thank you.
That topic? Okay. I think we're good, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. And as Ken noted, we'll take another look at where we drew the line as far as the double negative and single negative for that criteria. So moving on then to environmental justice. So this was a section that we that is described in the tech memo. What we did is we did a typical environmental justice analysis per federal highways, where we looked at criteria including minority populations and income, to try to identify environmental justice populations within the footprint of the route alternative. So based on the typical criteria, none of the the full study area is not necessarily considered environmental justice populations. However, we did take a little bit of a deeper dive and looked at some EPA screening, and also looked at disparity of income, particularly within Vergennes. And while the median income is at a higher level, there is quite a disparity, and there is a large percentage of the population that would, in fact, meet that threshold for environmental justice populations based on income, and not on minority, but based on income. So to be overly conservative, any of the routes that are within Vergennes are shown with a double negative here. So they're all negative for the potential to impact environmental justice populations, but then any of the routes that have a portion of them within Vergennes are the double negative. And that is something that would be assessed further during NEPA. Okay, then moving on to environmental resources. So I'll just kind of list these quickly. If there's any that you would like to go into a little bit more detail on. We looked at wetlands, the area of impacted class 2 wetlands. We looked at surface, the number of stream crossings. We looked at acreage of floodplain encroachment, as well as the acreage of state river corridors. And we looked at, for vegetative communities and wildlife habitat, we looked at the number and acreage of significant habitats that would potentially be impacted. And then we also looked at mapped rare and threatened and endangered species, as well as uncommon animal plant species present within the route, and then looked at the acreage of significant natural communities impacted. Really, these are all, as you can see, all impacts, no benefits here. We looked at the acreage of primary ag soils that would be impacted. And then one of the things that we have since expanded on, based on the review that Matthew and I mentioned earlier with the Vergennes Historic Preservation Office, we looked at the number of historic resources entirely intersecting with a route alternative. We also looked at the number of these are built resources, number of historic resources near, so within 750 feet of a route alternative. And then we also mapped known archaeological resources near a route alternative. And those are none of them actually intersected, but they are within near the route alternatives. So there was 3 criteria here. And then the last one is hazardous materials. And not surprisingly, the purple route would be highest there, given that its length. So any environmental resources that the committee would like to discuss further?
So we have at least one question in the row,
Sure.
Stephanie.
No, I'm sorry, dominating this a little bit.
No, please, we want the questions.
Again, so, you know, what I see as a pretty significant hurdle, and I'll, throw it back to the experts, is that wetlands, in terms of minimization and avoidance. It's obviously the first step in terms of determining whether or not you can have that. And in my simple mind, I'm looking at the purple route going, hey, there's already existing impacts here, maybe a little bit more along that corridor, but the new constructs are entirely new impacts. And how does one go to justify through that NEPA process and to state and Army Corps, how you're demonstrating minimization and avoidance when you have an alternative that's identified that would minimize and avoid impacts.
Yep, so that's one of the probably most important parts of determining whether or not something adequately meets the purpose and need. So that's what, like, the Corps would look for the least environmentally damaging practical alternatives. So it have to meet purpose and need in order to fill that bucket. This not being NEPA or the 404 process, there is still the potential possibility that during that regulatory phase, other alternatives could be pulled back into the mix. So that, as Stephanie said before, nothing that comes out of this is binding. Some of these alternatives could get pulled back in during the NEPA phase or during the Corps of Engineers permitting phase.
Thank you. So just, I guess the other question I had was with respect to prime soils or primary soils, if you're looking at 250 is 29 acres. That seems very high to me. I'm wondering, and at least in looking at the mapping that was provided in the document, it almost looks like the whole corridor was anticipated as new impacts. I don't know if that's the case or not.
It's outside of the existing roadway itself, so it's not necessarily outside of the right of way, but it's outside of the roadway.
Okay, so that is 29. Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it
that
was,
seems very high to me.
if you, I don't know if we sent you the earlier draft, the number was a lot bigger.
Okay.
And then saw and it seemed too big, went back, subtracted out the existing roadway. And so this is new impacts.
And I guess in terms of all historic resources within the corridor, I noted that the Addison Town Hall was on there, as well as the New Haven train station, which has since been moved. I don't know if that was, I'm looking at a late or the most current version or not, but as you probably know, the train station in New Haven has been moved. It's
Did
no
get
longer
relocated,
there.
right?
And I would be curious to understand what or how the town hall and the town Grange and Addison would be impacted, but that's maybe something, a little clarity. And I guess hazardous materials. You identified 15 sites. Do you know if those were, I don't know how much you took a dive into that. I'm assuming somebody just looked at the interest locator map and said, yep, here we go.
Yeah, it's just
Whether or
really
not they've been
A&R
smacked
atlas.
or not or anything. Okay.
Correct. It's just awareness in that sense.
And do you know where those 15, are they down at the are they in the intersection areas
They
or?
were sprinkled through there, but yeah, that's really just a pull out of the A&R atlas that shows those sites, and they're within proximity. They're not
Right.
necessarily within the impact.
Thank you.
And just
And that's
to circle back, I'm sorry, Ken, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's a good reason why the environmental scores are not part of the net score for purpose and need, because those can vary all over the place, and we just don't have enough information to say whether it's truly an impact or what that impact is. So the environmental piece is for awareness at this point.
Thanks, Ken. And just circling back on historic resources, yes, the train station relocation has been addressed or is reflected in the revised version. And that revised, which is not reflected in the version that you have in your copy of the alternatives evaluation tech memo. The revised section is being reviewed by VTrans Historic Preservation Office. So Matthew, when that's complete, we could share a copy with the policy committee.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and that will explain the 9 that are located. They're all identified in the revised versions. Okay. Unless there's any other questions on the evaluation matrix, we can move back to the presentation.
I think that's fine, Stephanie. I don't see any questions in the room.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to recap what we have discussed here. So the purple route does not meet the purpose and need. Again, this is based on our more detailed evaluation that we did using the evaluation criteria that were just shown. So the purple route alternative does not meet the purpose and need for transportation or local or regional issues. And then both the green route and the orange route alternatives, they do meet the purpose and need for transportation, but not for local and regional issues. We can go to the next slide, please, Maya. And then based on the results of the alternatives evaluation, the pink route and the blue route alternatives. They do meet both of the transportation and the local and regional issues related to the purpose and need. And then, of course, the no-build alternative will continue as per NEPA. So it is the consultant team's recommendation that both the pink and the blue route alternatives would move forward into NEPA along with the no-build alternative. We want to go to the next slide. I believe we were going to have a moment of public comment period. And this will be a chance for any public members that are attending. I believe we have two, unless anybody else came in the room since we started the meeting. So either Terry or Mel, you're free to, or Adam, I'll let you open up the public comment period.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephanie. So yeah, we felt it was important to give the members of the public that were present the opportunity to comment before the committee started its deliberation and went to vote. So if you have something to say, now is the time to do it.
I'll follow Terry.
Okay. Terry, do you have something to say? I'm gonna take that as a no, Mel, and I'm gonna let you go.
Still on? Sure, thank you. So let's start out with either one or two disclosures. So again, my name is Mel Hawley, and my wife and I own the property at 120 Panton Road, which is probably one of, if not the most affected property on the pink route. And just to be clear, obviously, I don't want the road going through there, but if in fact that is where the road's going to go, we won't live there. Right? And so when we move, we don't have a conflict of interest. So it really, that's the decision. That's fine. Somebody just pack us up and we'll leave. I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Prospect Cemetery. The pink route also, when it leaves Route 22A, it goes right through property owned by the Prospect Cemetery. It's an undeveloped portion of our holdings, but obviously it is land intended to bury people over the next century or two or three, right? And it's not like the Prospect Cemetery, if it loses a bunch of land, I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, just go start another cemetery somewhere else. I mean, it is the Prospect Cemetery. And I would hope that if there is a way to avoid taking that property from the Prospect Cemetery, I would hope that you would certainly consider that. Are you asking a question? I'm sorry.
No. I'm sorry. How much acreage does the cemetery?
I'd have to grab my parcel map and tell you.
Okay.
I mean, you basically, you're familiar with the Prospect Cemetery. We have what we call the old portion, which is close to John Emerson's house. Yeah. And then it goes, as it heads south, there is a newer section. And I'm going to say that I should know the acreage. If I was to guess, I would say that we own less than 10 acres total. All right. That's what I guess. And so we have probably, I think that there's probably 3 or 4 acres of undeveloped there. But I could get you the exact numbers if you'd like. So, okay. So that's my disclosure. So obviously I have a little bit of a conflict of interest. When you do let me just also quickly say that obviously for obvious reasons, I've been following this process pretty carefully. I noticed that I don't want to be necessarily critical of this committee. Jim and I have had some communications, and I've communicated with the so-called team that, I've gone to about every meeting and I'm on the mailing list. And when I found out that the technical committee had a meeting on December 13th, without my knowledge, and I do check the website quite periodically for upcoming events, particularly when there's a period of time, and I didn't know about it, and I, obviously you all run your meetings as if they're, because they are public meetings and there's a public comment period. I think I may have attended only one meeting of the technical committee, maybe, all right. And I don't know if I would have had an opportunity to talk anyway, but I just want to let you know that I feel as a person on the mailing list and somebody who has attended, in all frankness, you fell short, not you personally, Adam, but the process fell short a little bit relative to my lack of knowledge of the December 13th meeting. And I actually found out about it and read the package of the minutes, and then it packaged for that meeting, and then it also said comments can be filed by December 25th. Okay, and so I saw it on the 28th or whatever. Anyway, that's behind us. I did request, I would like to watch the Zoom meeting. I've made that request. Hopefully somebody will send it to me. If I wasn't going to be allowed to participate, that's okay. That's no big deal. I'm here today. I hope that you do not vote in favor of this recommendation, all right? I think that there's something in between, but there is something in between the purple route and the no build. I really firmly believe that. And what I feel has happened is that the matrix that you have here to score the purple route is driven by your own, not you, but on the plan that is part of the study. All right. And I've watched the visualization, I've listened to all of this, and it appears as if the purple alternative is a total reconstruction of Route 17. All right. And I think that that's way over the top, in my opinion. I don't think that you have that kind of a problem in front of you. But you said that portions of Route 17 are substandard and need to be upgraded. They probably should be upgraded this year. If that's the case, then upgrade them, okay? What I did not hear is that all of Route 17, the purple route, needs to be upgraded to accommodate the truck traffic. There's already trucks using that road today. And so all this matrix is based on a total reconstruction. And what it does is it inflates the number of property owners affected by the construction. It inflates the amount of acreage involved. It inflates the amount of acreage of wetlands involved. And so therefore, what is happening here is that your own actions of your consultants, and I don't know if it was their idea or your folks' idea, but I think that you should look at something in between the purple route and a no build. I don't think that no build is the right answer, but I do think that something in between, is an alternative that you should be investigating. A much smaller project to accomplish, and I do disagree when it says that only the pink and blue routes accomplishes the purpose and need. I don't agree with that. I think it's a matter of, if you think that purpose and need is to solve all of the problems of the world, okay, that might be the case. But I think the purpose of the need, as Brent mentioned right off, what's the mission? What's the purpose of this? And the purpose is to, I really don't think it's to eliminate truck traffic. You're not going to eliminate trucks going through the city of Vergennes. The mission is to minimize the impacts of trucks going through our downtown. And I think that the purple route, some form of the purple route, will accomplish your purpose and need. And so I really disagree with that particular slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Terry, you're the other person that's here from the public that I know about, but I'm gonna give anybody else from the public an opportunity to,
Terry has a comment here in the text box.
Thank you.
I agree with everything Mel has said today. I do wonder if part of the problem with using Route 17 is that there would be no way to force truck drivers to use it. If their GPS showed a shorter route through downtown Vergennes, then that's the route they would select. Has this been talked about? In general, I'm in favor of using existing roads and would love to see Mel's ideas considered.
okay, great. Would somebody from well, do you want to address Terry's question about whether or not you considered GIS? Excuse me, GPS.
So to Terry's point, 100% correct, that it would have to be an enforced use of Vermont 17. And that was the case when we looked at Vermont 17 as the route for all traffic in that sense. So the only way to make it happen is to enforce that all through trucks aren't allowed to go through Vergennes. There's nothing physical that will stop. So that is correct.
Okay. Are there any other comments from any other members of the public?
And I just want to address one thing of Mel's, though, just a little bit of the background of the, excuse me, of the why the improvements are what they are on 17. Is that you're right, trucks use it today. And VTrans and federal highway, VTrans is allowed to do up to a certain point of improvements using federal money based on rehabilitation as it is currently. But when you step up that next level, which is changing traffic characteristics and actually having to make design changes, then you have to meet the federal standards, the state and federal standards. So it pushes it over the edge of a paving project to something bigger. And once you get to that something bigger, then you have to follow the same guidelines and rules that you do for a new roadway. So that's the impetus behind having to make as drastic changes as we have proposed in this.
Great, thank you.
Yes, clarifying question. So, does the NEPA process, require proposals to be put forth so that you have more than one option? I mean, no build is already, but I was just wondering in terms of that as an influential factor or not.
So there are no specific requirements of numbers. You could go in with a single alternative. And NEPA then would look at, it would be more focused on the minimization side of things. So it's like, this is your general route, but if you tweak it a little bit here, you can reduce your impacts and such. So similar to your point about the cemetery. And that's the kind of thing that would be looked at in the NEPA process. Is there something between blue and pink that is a better fit that we just don't have the information currently to make that kind of decision? So.
And we've been encouraged by our FHWA office to really reflect on the number of alternatives to make sure that to first message as part of this process that multiple alternatives must move forward, and alternatives that were previously excluded might come back as part of that NEPA process. And so the idea of, again, this is the first drawing the lines on the map and doing a preliminary screening of impacts that then would be refined by that second stage in that NEPA process. And so that second stage might open up questions about comparison of the intrinsic nature of these routes, such as the new bridge structures that would be required as part of the blue and pink versus alternatives. And maybe another alternative comes back into play as a result of it, right? So just to say that, like Ken said, yes, there's no guidance, but we've been encouraged to move multiple alternatives forward just in light of having a global assessment of the impacts at play.
And can I just ask who was it that asked that question? Just for the record, for the minutes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. And it feels like we've moved from public comments into basically the discussion of the policy committee. Before we do that, I do want to give any other members of the public one last chance to speak up. And then go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, just one thing. I realize that you regard the pink route and the blue route as two alternatives. I really don't think that there's much of a difference between the two. I just don't really see that as Because I think when you look at the map, you can see that about 80% of the alternative route is the same, whether it's pink or blue. So
Right.
I see those as being kind of sub-alternatives of an alternative.
Yeah, and just for your info, earlier in the process, we actually did combine them. And everything was being evaluated as pink and blue, but there was enough difference between the two that just for transparency, we kept them as separate.
I understand that,
Yep.
but I'm going to just repeat myself.
Right.
As an observer, that's really just one alternative, and it actually has a band. The where they separate is just, I mean, at one point 50 years ago, they looked at like a path of a bypass for Vergennes, and it wasn't looked at as a line. It was looked at as like a range of where this thing might go. So I just, again, see it as really just one alternative.
And you're right, Mel. When we did our screening, we did look at a very high level band, and they were combined as Ken noted. But for this evaluation, part of our process was that we developed conceptual designs for each of the alternatives. So while they are the same at the northern end, they do vary at the southern end, and each of them have their a distinct footprint, and that's why they were evaluated separately.
Okay, great. I think I'm gonna close the public comment period then without any objections, and we'll just move into the policy committee's discussion. So now policy committee is your chance to ask questions, to bring up points that you want to bring up, and to engage with the study committee on their recommendation.
Back to me again, sorry, I apologize, I was away for a bit, I didn't really have an opportunity to dive into this. This morning I did send an email both to Mike and to Adam, just kind of outlining some comments that I had with respect to the study. Like somewhat in hindsight, one of the evaluation criteria I seem to think that didn't make it to the list, but really is just timeline and implementation. Some of the options are, at least for me, I think I'll never see them happen. Other ones maybe have the ability to be implemented right off. In collaboration with that, or in concert with that, is that as you may know, the city of Vergennes is looking to replace the bridge in town. I think that's probably 5 to 10 years out before that happens. But at that time, we're going to have some serious conversations about how trucks and vehicles in general make it through town. I would like to think that the purple route is a viable option to that, or will need to be at some point. And I think that just maybe some discussion on that would be helpful in the document itself to really inform the document in terms of what decisions were made and why. And then I thought I had another comment here, but in any case, I sent the email. It's not all include, it didn't incorporate all my comments, but I think touches upon some elements. One of which is just really the traffic counts. Seem to be, some of them are more than 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How relevant that is or not, understanding the magnitude of the changes. But yeah, I guess the key thing here, at least for me as a resident in town, speaking selfishly, is that I'd love to see something happen within my lifetime. We did have, I had a very interesting conversation with the engineer that was from VTrans that was describing the improvements on the Route 22A corridor and implementation and the struggles with getting those enacted and constructed. And knowing what I know of transportation projects, this, and probably Mel can attest to this, the first study of this bridge crossing was in like 95 or something like that, right? And at that time it was like it's 20 years away, it's never gonna happen, so it just, people threw their hands up and said, well, we're gonna have to live with the status quo. Unfortunately, had we maybe taken more action or been more, in line with that and realize that, maybe now we already have that, alternative in place. I just see that, the timeline of this is pretty critical as well in terms of how that aligns with the bridge replacement, as well as just the immediate impacts to the city of Vergennes. I mean, honestly, it's only a matter of time until somebody gets run over or something catastrophic happens on the hill into town. During the snowy time of year, fuel propane trucks coming up, trying to stop at McDonough Drive it's gonna happen. I've seen 18-wheelers sliding back downhill on that loaded with all sorts of stuff. So, at least somewhat of an acknowledgement or I know it's not at this point, I think maybe a moot point in terms of adding it as a criterion for the alternative, but maybe a conversation on that in terms of how to better inform moving forward the timeline of work. So that residents in the communities are aware of, how long this is going to be. And sorry, just 5 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting at City Hall and the bridge replacement was top on the list, putting in a new structure. And I think even then they were like, oh, 5 to 10 years, we'll get the economic development corridor. It's like, no way. Yeah. Right. So I think there just needs to be a level of practicality here. Thank you. Sorry.
I can address a couple of those just from a procedural standpoint. So from the scoring and ranking side of things, neither timeline or cost are things that you can use in the ranking process in NEPA. So that's why we kept it separate. Certainly from a planning standpoint, it's things that folks are interested in. The timeline is something that we would better, put some flesh on it in the implementation plan, but you kind of need to know a direction before you can do that. But they're all, as you said, every one of those alternatives, especially any of the new construction alternatives, are a significant amount of time, even from the time that you secure funding. How long it is between now and when you secure funding is just a huge unknown.
Thanks.
Well, and when you get to that, 54 million is going to be easier to obtain than 132 million. I mean, that's got to be a consideration.
If it solves the problem, right? That's, you don't want to spend money on something that doesn't actually solve the problem.
Well,
So that's the big
that goes to the point of, do you really, is the problem really zero truck traffic in Vergennes, or is it minimize it?
Lower, correct. Yep.
So that's subjective.
I think.
Yeah, so to the infrastructure conversation around the existing bridge, I had heard a data point that I'm trying to recall about municipalities of this population, not so much footprint because we're small, that only have, we're the only one of this density that has one egress over the river or fluvial corridor that runs through its municipality, correct? Don't most others have 2 or more?
I don't know that data, but
okay.
But it's definitely a truth.
I'm
You only
curious
have one
about
point
that
from
just
the south.
because of the condition of the bridge, the fact that we have fragmented emergency services with first responders being on either side. I do remember conversationally with our previous police chief that years ago, former Vice President Ted Pence was in Bombazine vacationing. He was going to come through Vergennes. They actually changed the route because of safety concerns for that bridge. And that was at the Secret Service level. So these are all just things that are spinning in my head when I'm looking at the public safety emergency response dynamics of only having one bridge that is definitely worn, tattered, and in desperate need of a replacement. So
Yeah, it's certainly safe to say that bridge will get replaced before any of these alternatives.
Sure.
Reconstruction. So
I'm thinking like sort of like long term is having a redundancy within our public safety and response mechanism.
Having some resilience and an additional bridge gives you that redundancy for sure. Yep. And that was talked about a lot during this project study times from folks. it didn't get directly wrapped into the criteria of it's a bonus if you have it, it's a negative if you don't, but it is maybe qualitatively in there, if that makes sense. Okay. Just from a transportation standpoint.
Like travel time, for example. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, it's just not an independent criteria.
Understood.
Any other? Rhonda?
Well, I was just wondering, given the comments, around the purple route. If it wouldn't make sense for us to consider putting forth 3 proposals. I mean, I don't wanna, not pay attention to, it's a fairly high number in terms of the local and regional issues. And the number of types of institutions and residents would be impacted. At the same time, there are timing and current route issues that may play out differently in a federal process. I mean, I hadn't considered it until coming here and hearing people talk about it. So I just thought to bring that up as a potential.
So what you're suggesting is, does the policy committee have the ability to vote to basically accept the study and add an additional alternative is the question?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Would someone like to address that, or should I try and address that?
Why don't you go, Adam? Yeah.
I think we, as the policy committee, have the ability to do that if that's what we choose to do. So, our goal here, I think, is to come up with alternatives that address the issue, that address the purpose and need. Certainly we've got a very qualified study committee. They've spent a lot of time putting time and putting their recommendations together, and we certainly want to give them consideration and take them seriously, but also ultimately we, the policy committee, have the ability to make other suggestions.
How this was done in the city of Burlington for a similar PEL study was to accept the consultant recommendations, provide consensus to move forward to NEPA, and identify a locally preferred alternative. That locally preferred alternative would just be on record. That would not have sway over the NEPA process, but it would constitute additional contextual evidence that would be presented as part of the conclusion of the study. So that's how that was addressed, that kind of balance between responding to this consensus point and making note of a specific committee decision per Adam's point. That's how that was accomplished elsewhere. My battery's running low. Uh-oh. How does that happen if that's plugged in?
Uh-oh. Check your power source.
Back on?
Okay.
Okay.
So I would agree with Rhonda in the sense that, I'd like to see 3 options shown. It's pretty clear in terms of the report that you generated that it does not meet the purpose and need. What I would really like to understand is elaborate a little bit more in terms of how it doesn't meet that, at least the purple route. I was struggling with the transportation related issues and how that kind of fit into that category myself. I would not want to see it as a kind of a subcategory. If it's an alternative, I'd like to be considered as opposed to just a note that, this is what a local support building. So that's just my opinion.
I agree. And I struggle with the routes are notional. I mean, yeah, there's been work, we've done fly-throughs, but the pink and blue routes really are very, very similar. It's just whether it's in Vergennes or if it's in Panton. So in one way that really doesn't provide an option, 2 options. So I think the purple route is the one that should be carried forward as a true alternate instead of just a minor diversion or minor difference. That makes sense.
Ken, would you or Stephanie like to address, go back to the transportation elements of the purpose and needs and talk specifically about the purple routes?
Yep, we can for just a minute. I just want to address the purple route in general, to your point. And just based on past V-Trans history, with the only other new road alternative that went through a, new road project that went through the full NEPA EIS process, which wasn't the circumferential highway. Was a very similar situation. That went into it strictly with a new road build alternative as being what was going to be analyzed during the NEPA process. But the process then required you have to look at existing roads as an alternative as well. So the process itself pulled that back in and had to be analyzed for that. So it doesn't stray drastically from what we may encounter in NEPA anyhow. So I don't think pulling the purple route back in is gonna throw a wrench in the works in any way in that sense.
But in terms of sorry, Brent Markowski again, in terms of how that evaluation goes to the NEPA, they're really just focusing on those alternatives. And it isn't until there's a deal breaker or something with one of those alternatives that they would then look at the purple route. Is that right? The fair statement?
So yeah, you would look at all three alternatives that go through equally in that sense, based on the purpose and need. But it would be at a higher level of analysis. So it would be the proof, through that process of does this meet purpose and need?
Right.
And do you want to address Brett's question about the transportation section again and why the study committee felt that the purple route did not meet the transportation purpose?
Yes, I can do it to a point. Stephen might have to jump in, but it is generally, as we said, it only is half as good a benefit as the other. So it's a benefit, but it's not as good a benefit as pink and blue. But the offset was the additional distance for truck traffic. And then the one criteria is change in overall network traffic operations. So it does make currently poor intersections worse in that sense. So either end of 17.
Right. So from the purpose and need statement, it's a minimization, right? So I guess the volume standpoint, we're minimizing from traffic operations. Yeah, you're adding time. Is that part of the NEPA? That's part of the NEPA process, the traffic operations in terms of travel times?
It will get into it more deeply than we did here.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. This is much more, you can't call it qualitative, but it's not top tier modeling.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put the round peg in the square hole is in terms of the travel times. How does that align with the purpose and needs, aligned or not aligned with the purpose and needs statement? I mean, it's, you're minimizing, the truck traffic, whether or not they drive further. I understand that it's a NEPA component as review, but from the purpose and needs statement, it's by far meets that purpose. I guess in my opinion, meets the purpose and needs statement, right?
So it meets it by reducing truck traffic going through Vergennes,
right?
But it shows it as an impact because in the purpose and need, it's looking for solutions that then do not cause an impact to the trucking community.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken, keep going.
Yeah. So it goes more to I don't think anybody can argue that it is an impact.
Right.
The question is, should that first line be scored higher than the second and third line?
Yeah, well, I mean, just
understand
to disregard it out of hand, like, well, doesn't meet it. To me, that doesn't. I don't see that. You're still, regardless of whether somebody drive, yes, it's an impact to them, but so are all these other things that are happening, and just trying to weigh that correctly.
It all comes down to your position.
Yeah.
If you're the trucking company that runs through there and you're costing them money, I won't put a number to it because I don't know what it is, but that's a big impact to them saying, well, yeah, so your trucks go through your downtown. It's not a problem to me. That's a problem to you. So it's a balancing act for sure.
what you're hitting on is really with the purpose and need statement that we have, it is a tight needle that we've been trying to thread throughout this entire study, right? And so the nuances of this have not escaped us, and certainly arriving at this conclusion, there has been a lot of vetting and process that has gone into this from the get-go, but it's definitely something that we as a study team have gone back and forth about. What is that dissonance, or what is that connection between, or what is that trade-off between impacts or benefits to downtown Vergennes versus the region? And so that impact from a regional perspective with the purple route seemed to weigh it differently and more impactful relative to the blue or pink routes, which is why it had that level of separation. So again, this is something that's this is the tightest needle as we've had to thread as part of this, because we've chosen routes that are on one hand are good for some areas and really bad for, or not bad, but just impactful to other areas. So
well, you know, again, I guess I struggle with the fact is like, does it to me, it doesn't seem like to me, it seems like it meets the purpose of me.
So I have this slide pulled up here, which I think is maybe helpful. This is our purpose and need. And you're right, it does meet that first part of the purpose. It's reducing the impacts of truck traffic, but the components of the purpose and need. So the needs shown in the icons below that, those are where we're getting those additional criteria. So we're looking at mobility and access and the movement of freight in the region, but also mitigating traffic impacts along transportation corridors. So that's where you're getting that negative, particularly with the purple, because you would be adding additional trucks along an existing roadway with additional conflict points. And similarly with safety and circulation. So we do have criteria. So we have criteria that touch on all of these needs. These were the needs that were identified, with the previous 2019 study, and then reinforced through our public outreach when we started this study, and then, discussed with you at the policy committee as well as the technical committee. So I think that, where there's the additional criteria are really coming from the needs as well as the purpose. Does that help?
A little bit. Thank you, Stephanie. That I guess the part, and I'm sorry for dominating this, is really just a minimization component of that, right? Is okay, well, regional freight in the area. I mean, I guess you're minimizing it, but that, in my mind, doesn't disqualify you from meeting the purpose and need statement. It may be a double negative and a dark red on your chart, but it still meets the purpose and need.
It partially meets the purpose.
Yeah,
it meets the purpose and need to a degree.
Right. Okay.
But where do we draw the line? That's been the question with this study, all throughout. Where do you draw the line on a lot of these things? So we, using the input that we got and the information that we have, took our best shot at representing what's there.
And this is how we're going to be evaluated by our federal partners too, is not so much the content, but the process. Like, did you follow your process? Did you follow the process in terms of declaration of a purpose and need statement, the interpretation of that and evaluation and matrix, the identification of recommendations that respond to that original purpose and need statement? And so when we're looking at this, we're certainly considering those nuanced qualitative benefits in the way that you're raising, and certainly part of the committee structure of this entire study is to enrich that with very much local input, as much as, through our public information officer, Jim, going out and talking to people to understand that whole qualitative impact. But from working with our federal partners, what we're going to be evaluated on in terms of a measure of success of this study is how we manage the process, and if we responded accordingly or follow the rules that we set out as part of this process. So that's why, taking a more stricter interpretation of it, to Ken's point, is how the recommendations that have arisen as part of this.
I mean, maybe a better analogy is really like one of the blue routes through town is, you're going to have impacts, environmental impacts. Does that disqualify it from meeting the purpose and need? And it doesn't. So I'm just wondering how that correlates to regional transportation. And it seems like the regional transportation one is like, oh, I've got to drive 5 minutes longer, doesn't meet the purpose and need. Meanwhile, installing a new bridge over Otter Creek and, segmenting the environmental corridors and crossing the wetlands and property line adjustments and whatnot, those still meet the purpose and need.
I think the consultant team, can you speak a little bit, Ken, Stephanie, Steve, can you speak about the scale of purple route as opposed to the other routes too? Because is there a scale question here that somehow, just given the length of the length of this route alternative plus the geographic extent of it versus the other routes, is that somehow something that factors into
That
this as
definitely
well?
factors into the environmental impacts in that side of it, just because it's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, folks, but it's about 7 miles of Route 17 versus 2.5 miles for the other, so it is it stacks up equally just because of its overall.
And don't get me wrong here, I'm open for all alternatives. I'm just thinking that just that it being disqualified from the discussion is limiting moving forward.
Right.
think
And I mean,
that
your argument right now is exactly the argument that will come up during the NEPA process of saying, does your purpose and need, does the satisfaction of your purpose and need justify these environmental impacts for alternatives, blue, pink, green, whichever it happens to be, when you have this other on-street alternative that may adequately address purpose and need. So that is, again, it's a deeper dive once you get to that point.
And to be clear, just again, the purpose of the PEL process is that first high-level preliminary screening, right? So to Ken's point, try to like understand the universe of alternatives, and then how we whittled it down so far to just these ones alone is already a significant screening process. And so that continued deep dive as part of the NEPA process would, build upon this. The goal of this is to lay the groundwork for future processes in addition to that pre-screening. And so as part of that pre-screening, so ultimately if there is something that is called into question, then that opens up the opportunity to, again, think about an alternative. But just by virtue of the process as it stands right now and how we identify the purpose and need, how we've gone through our evaluation matrix, how we've done a bunch of different community impact assessments, both from a quantitative and a qualitative standpoint, this is the sum of that process work so far. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this does not preclude, again, as part of the NEPA process, if the blue and pink are deemed as not sufficient as part of that, then there would be the opportunity to identify other route alternatives. So.
And again, because we always have to bring that, elephant into the room, there is the no build. So in that NEPA process, it could be, so we go in blue and pink and purple, they say, blue and pink has too many impacts, doesn't justify the benefits. So they'd select the no build. Could be the same for purple, that it doesn't have enough benefits to justify its impacts, even though it's less than blue and pink. So the selection could be the no build. So
So I guess I'll put you on the spot. My question for the day is there an approach moving forward where the purple is a viable option for submission to NEPA in your mind? And I guess it's somewhat from what I'm hearing is maybe not really, I don't know.
I think to what Adam said earlier, I think it's a viable option for the policy committee to say, like blue, pink, and purple to be the three that would be considered moving forward.
But in terms of the recommendation in the draft document that you're putting together, is that recommendation saying these three alternatives meet the purpose and need statement, or
does not?
Okay.
It would be your committee action that would then be
That's all I wanted to-
documented as part of the study.
Okay.
Yep.
So to actually change the outcome of our recommendation sense, we would have to take several steps back to change how things are all evaluated to make it line up.
Thank you.
And the process as well as the content, as I mentioned before, that all gets packaged as part of the final study document that then is brought forward and shared with our federal partners. And so, again, to Ken's point, documenting a committee decision here provides that additional qualitative evidence for further evaluation and consideration at the conclusion of this process, and if there is a beginning to a subsequent process.
Are there other questions, concerns from the policy committee? Ready? Yes, absolutely.
Always point at the person.
And I've only gotten questions from those of us in the room
We
so
got
far.
Katie.
Oh, Katie's got one. Okay, good. Why don't I go to Katie and you can,
Thank you. I think I'm feeling our team hasn't had a full chance to dive into the details here, and I'm feeling a little bit like this conversation has been really helpful, but has also raised some more questions. And so I'm curious if somebody can speak to, on the consensus point that we're looking to reach here, exactly what we are looking for today and what the timeline is moving forward, and if there's any flexibility in providing the policy committee a little bit more time to review and consider the options here.
Adam, do you want me to answer that one? Or
Yes,
do you
please.
want? Okay.
Let's say go ahead.
Okay, all right, and please chime in if needed. So Katie, the consensus point that is listed here on the slide, that is what we were looking for today. So we were looking for a vote from the policy committee, whether you approve the evaluation tech memo and whether you approve the study team's recommendation. So that would be the pink and the blue routes moving forward into NEPA, and that you give your consensus to proceed to NEPA pending funding authorization, which would be a future action from VTrans or Federal Highway. We now also have on the table to add the purple route for continued study under NEPA, not meeting the purpose and need, but that it is a preference of the policy committee. So we were looking for that vote today, and additional comments due from the committee members by the 13th. So that was on the table. If the committee does not feel that they can make that vote, Adam, I'll leave that decision to you, whether we want to postpone the vote.
Thought I heard somebody say something.
Yeah, me.
Oh, would you like me to address Stephanie or do you want to go ahead?
Well, maybe what I'm gonna say will make us go ahead. Because to take the motion, I'll make the motion to support the recommendation. And because this whole thing has gone for a lot of years, and I've been a part of a good many of them. And to get this far, I mean, we've never come this far. And I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize the ability for us to go forward. And particularly when I hear that in the NEPA process, the other alternative, the purple alternative, correct, purple alternative could come back, okay? Which I think is a reasonable thing to look at. But there's another part of the process that may address that. I don't think this is that part of the process. I think we should move forward with what we've got. Personally, they're the two routes, the blue and the pink. I think actually the pink, is more realistic. I know they're trying to say it's the same thing. They're really not the same exactly, because the pink keeps us in Vergennes. And there's another thing to consider is the politics surrounding this. There's a lot of politics surrounding this, particularly money. Okay, I worked in the court system. I've been involved in building courthouses. And I know the money comes from a different place, but I'll tell you, it's a tough process politically to get enough money to build a damn courthouse, much less to build a highway through people's properties and so on. Okay, it isn't easy. And so, from a political basis, having it all within Vergennes makes more sense, because we're the most affected as opposed to some other town. And the same thing with the purple route. How many other municipalities are affected? How many other people are affected? And that becomes a real political football. And particularly when it comes to deciding on the money. And I don't think we should take that risk. If it comes up in the NEPA process and there's a lot of things to justify that that's the best thing to do, that's fine. I think we can go and we can argue that point, but not right now. I think we should move forward with what we've got. That's my motion.
Okay, we will continue discussion after the motion, but there is a motion on the floor. Is anyone would like to second that motion?
I will second Rennie's motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and now we can get into basically further discussion. It's what we were doing already anyway. We have a specific motion before us. Katie had asked basically what our process was going forward. Just reading the room after that, I think people want to make a decision today. The motion is there in second. If we want to move it forward, then I'd advise you to stand against the motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Katie, I'm happy to have a phone call with you just to kind of assuage any concerns that you might have. So I'll send you an email on the side and we can connect accordingly if you're comfortable with that.
Thank you. Yes, that'd be great.
Yep. Okay.
Great, thank you. And then the second half of Katie's question was processed from here, and I know Stephanie is going to go into that after, I believe, that's kind of our last point. If assuming we get to a consensus point and a vote, then where do we go from here? So if we can address that later, is that okay, Katie, or do you want to risk?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. So the motion on the floor is basically to move to approve the study team's recommendations. Is there further discussion about that particular motion amongst policy committee members?
I'd wonder what the temperature is in terms of agreeing to amending that motion to include a local alternative. It should be the purple now.
I'd have to direct you to the motioner in the second to see if they were open to. Rennie, go ahead.
Well, I just have a question about that.
And I do want to be mindful of our time a little bit here too.
Well, I don't want to screw up the process. If that kind of an amendment, and I do think it deserves some consideration. I just don't want to screw up as far as we've gone. And if that amendment doesn't interfere with us moving forward, getting into the NEPA process and so on, I have no problem with it. Okay, but if it seems like it's going to be a problem, then I'm not in favor.
That amendment would be consistent with, again, how the city of Burlington approached the city of Burlington City Council approached their PEL process by voting to proceed with the process and identifying particularly a locally preferred alternative. So what that would substantially do is provide additional contextual evidence. As we've said, there's a lot of qualitative evidence that's enriched this study that has come about from committee conversation and public outreach. And certainly the committee identifying that would not impact the process.
Okay, so Matthew, on the slide, we have kind of 2 points that we're trying to reach consensus on. There's an approval of the study team's recommendation, and then there is a consensus to proceed to NEPA pending funding. Would it be approving the study committee's recommendation as one step and as per the motion, and then in the second step, yes, and add this? Is that how you envision it?
I would envision it as a third step. So approval, NEPA, signaling of a locally preferred alternative.
Approval, NEPA, and then signaling of, in this case, maybe not a preferred alternative, but and we would like you to give consideration to this third alternative.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and just chiming in that, I think that will be the cleanest for our notes and just for documenting the process. So I think first vote is approving the technical memo and the study team's recommendation. Second vote would be consensus to move to NEPA, and third vote would be approving a additional alternative, the purple route, as the locally preferred alternative from the policy committee. But I think there's a nuance there. Is that actually the committee's preferred route, or is it just that you would like the route to be considered in NEPA in addition to the pink and the blue route. So that should be clarified in that third vote.
Reading the room in the third vote, I think it's in addition, it's not a preferred.
Okay, that's what I'm hearing as well. Thank you.
Just like equal consideration.
Could I get a definition of signaling? You said signaling. So is that different from approving?
No, in that case, it would just be stating that upon review of this document, the committee has decided that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, okay, so the motion on the floor is actually the first one.
Mhm.
The first in that 3-point step is the Mary.
Can we vote in order 3, 1, 2?
So I have to take the motion on the floor, so I afraid not, unless your motioner and seconder would be willing to do that.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not so sure that the order of the motions makes any difference, so I could withdraw the motion. If the seconder would withdraw the motion, then we can go with the additional, the add-on as a first motion, and then the other two. It does, I mean, the people that are needing this, is that gonna make any difference?
No.
No.
Yeah. That's good.
I'll withdraw my second if that's amenable.
Okay, so. Is everyone first, I can't see necessarily people that are not here, but reading the room, it seems that they're amenable to that. Is that the case for the people on the screen as well? Okay, hearing nothing. Mary?
So I think the motion needs to be, the policy committee would like to have purple route. I'm not sure the exact words that South Burlington used, that we would like to have the purple route included in this recommendation to NEPA.
Will include preferred alternative.
Well, not a preferred alternative.
Considered as part as.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be included in consideration with the,
Go with the legislature.
Yes,
Yeah.
not preferred.
Yeah.
With
To be included for consideration with both the pink and the blue routes.
Move that the purple route
Be included for consideration.
be included for consideration in addition to the purple and the pink route.
Blue and pink.
Purple, blue and pink.
We're adding purple to blue and pink.
I'll second that.
Who's our note taker?
We're recording it, so.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that motion? Everybody understands it? Do we have a second for that motion? Brett
Yeah.
Burkowski seconds the motion. Is there any further discussion regarding that motion? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna go for a vote. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. Or actually, maybe I should
Roll call that.
Roll call?
Yeah.
okay, let's roll call that. Delia?
Sure. I'll go down. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Please,
I'll
Delia.
I'll go down the list, and Adam, I'll wrap it up with you. I'll include those who weren't here at the beginning in case they've joined. Bill Smith. Oh, and if you agree, please say yes. Katie Gallagher,
Yes.
Brent Rakowski,
Yes.
Clark Hinsdale, Representative Lamfer,
Yes.
Jubilee McGill, or Representative McGill, apologies. Ron Redmond,
Yes.
Matt Bozick, sorry Matt for the name.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Orancio,
Yeah.
Mary Rudd,
Yes.
Representative Barong,
Yes.
Mike Audie, Rennie Perry,
Yes.
Phil Summers,
Yes.
Rhonda Williams,
Yes.
and Adam. Wrap it up for us. Great.
Okay,
So that motion has passed.
thank you. Are we ready to move on? And I guess I'm going to say to the first motion, given the change that we've made, are we ready to also accept the study committee's recommendations?
Yeah, should I make that motion again?
Please.
Okay, I would move to accept the study committee's recommendations.
Second.
That was Ron, seconded, okay, thank you. Discussion regarding accepting the study committee's recommendations. As you have already modified them a little bit by your previous motion. Any discussion? Okay. And you also have the ability to submit comments on the recommendation until the 13th, Stephanie?
Correct.
Okay.
And the tech memo itself.
And the tech memo itself. Okay, hearing no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion to accept the study committee's recommendations, please signify by saying aye. And actually, we're gonna do a roll call. So go ahead, Julia.
Thank you. Katie Gallagher,
I'm going to abstain pending our conversation with Matthew.
okay. Brent Rakowski,
I'm going to say no, based upon just, I still am struggling with the purpose and need and why that purple route is disqualified.
thank you. Diane Lambert or Representative Lambert?
Not representative at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. I'm a yes.
Ron Redmond,
Yes.
Matt Bozak,
Yes.
Matthew Orencio,
Yep.
Mary Rudd,
No.
Representative Barong,
Yes.
Rennie Perry,
Yes.
Phil Summers,
Yes.
Rhonda Williams,
Yes.
and Adam.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and then our last item would be to basically move into, let's see, let me find it, goodness. It's the last page.
The third.
Yeah, it's the third,
vote.
it's, no, it's basically give your consensus to proceed to NEPA. As we've amended it.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Rennie.
Second.
Go ahead, Ron.
Rhonda Williams seconds. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none. Delia, would you call a roll call vote as well again, please?
I will. Beginning with Katie.
I'll abstain.
Okay. Brent Rakowski,
Yes.
Diane Lambert,
Yes.
Ron Redmond,
Yes.
Matt Bozak,
Yes.
Matthew Orencio,
Yep.
Mary Rudd,
Yep.
Representative Barong,
Yes.
Rennie Perry,
Yes.
Phil Summers,
Yes.
Rhonda Williams,
Yes.
and Adam. Great, thank you.
Okay,
Just one note for the record. I think Brett, you would, Adam, I'm going to leave this decision to you, but I think Brett would need to abstain on this vote as well, if he's abstaining on the previous vote. Would that make sense?
I actually voted in the negative on the prior, and
That you, okay,
I'm not sure that he would. I
Well,
think.
okay.
right.
A separate decision, okay. But then the consensus is just moving the purple. It's consensus to move forward with only the purple? If you,
No, it's a consensus to move forward with the three and the no build. So the pink, the blue, and the purple.
okay. Who else abstained then? I thought it was Brett.
It was
No.
Katie.
No, I have Katie abstaining for both of those votes, and then Brent reported no, and Mary Rudd also reported no to the vote regarding the pink and blue route.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
it shouldn't show that they were of equal standing. The addition of the purple route is an add-on.
Hmm.
And
To staff recommendation.
Yes.
It's a policy committee recommendation.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
policy committee recommendation.
I guess I don't
Yes.
view that as equal, but if everybody else does, I guess that's what it is.
That's what it is too, but
But
had
yeah,
a-
what was the it was the policy, does the policy committee
Mhm.
support adding this moving. And then we basically moved them all forward. Okay, Stephanie, we're over time, but if we can give everybody an idea of where we're going real quickly, that would be great.
Sure, yep, I can be very quick. Next slide, Maya. So in terms of technical work, so we do have our recommended alternatives. We finished the alternatives evaluation tech memo, so we will be looking for any additional comments from the committee up until January 13th. And I know, Matthew, you and Katie are going to follow up. Please let us know if you'd like us to join that call as well. So the next step really is for us the consultant team will move forward with an implementation plan. And then we will be also developing the final PEL report, which will include the recommended alternatives. It'll look at the local land use regulations and planning, which were identified through the land use visioning tech memo, and then the funding and financing options. And those will be identified in the implementation plan. In terms of meetings and outreach, we will be having a public informational meeting. We're planning for that in the late winter, early spring timeframe. And we will keep the committee apprised of a location and the date of that once we get moving forward on scheduling that. So, any questions?
Okay.
Okay,
Hearing
I think that's
I
it.
am going to look for a motion to adjourn and thank you all for the extra time. And thank you for your service on this committee and moving us forward. So. Okay, Mary moves to adjourn. Any seconds, all in favor? We're gonna do this one by voice vote.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up to some lunch. I know we kept you a little bit over, so I hope you enjoyed the nice food that we were able to get.
Feel free to take it.
There it is.